and participating as stakeholders. These difficult times are making a lot of things possible that weren't necessarily possible before, and that's something that we are excited to share with you. We have really been making strides in leveraging our resources together to make sure the most vulnerable people in our communities right now are getting the housing that they need. And we're bringing our entire homeless service system into a more racially equitable design. So, do you want to put up the agenda slide? Okay, so we're going to start off with Jessica Shimon, our Director of Analytics, and Darlene Flynn, the Director of Race and Equity from the City of Oakland. They're going to give us a presentation on centering racial equity in homeless system design. We will also have an update on new resources and their utilization for the COVID era challenges. After that, we're going to hear about 3 major ballot items our stakeholders have worked long and hard to bring to voters: Measure W, Prop 15, and Prop 21. Here at Everyone Home, we've had some changes to the committees that oversee our COC. So we're going to address that news. And this is an action item, audience participation. We're going to need a membership vote on some matters related to our annual elections and the window of time for changes to the governance charter. So look alive for that. And in closing, we're going to hear from our wonderful Executive Director, Elaine. Housekeeping, the house rules are pretty standard. Everyone is automatically muted. If you have questions at any point, just put them in the chat box. Be aware this entire meeting is being recorded. And just as a reminder, the materials we're going to see today will be sent to everybody who RSVP'd and will also be available on the Everyone Home website as of tomorrow. So before we dive in, this year, Everyone Home has gained 2 amazing new additions to the staff. Many of you already know them from their work on the committees, but it's my pleasure to formally introduce them to the membership body. Janae Aubrey is Everyone Home's Director of COC Strategies. Janae, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, Katie, thank you so much. As Katie mentioned, I'm Janae Aubrey, the new Director of COC Strategies. Very happy to be here with you all. Just a little bit of background. I was on the COC committee and the HMIS committee before and worked in DV services before this position. I'm super excited to be here. I don't think Katie could have said it any better, but given these crazy, strange times, this work is more meaningful than ever, right? We all have so much work to do, and I'm happy to do it with you all.
Great. And we also have Courtney Welch, who is our COC specialist. Courtney, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Welch, and I am the COC specialist. I work under the wonderful direction of Janae. And previously, I was with Homeownership San Francisco as a program coordinator, also previously with MPH. And so I'm very happy as an Oakland native to be working in Alameda County and doing work to end homelessness right in my own backyard.
Thank you, Courtney. As everyone knows, this is our last meeting with Elaine as the Executive Director of Everyone Home. We're going to hear from her at the end of the meeting, and at that time, we will open up the floor to anyone who would like to share thoughts, feelings, remarks, etc. But before we dig into our presentations this afternoon, we're going to kick this off right with a commendation from the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. Dave Brown is here as the board's representative. So take it away, Dave.
Thank you. It is with great pleasure and honor on behalf of Supervisor Wilma Chan to present a proclamation signed by all 5 members of the board on behalf of Elaine. She, is a policy expert who has led with her heart, and because of that has been a tremendously effective leader. And I've been a pleasure to know her and work with her. I have tremendous respect for her. And I want to read you a little bit of the proclamation. I won't go through the whole thing because it's pretty long, but leave a few of the highlights. Whereas Elaine DeColney has led EveryOne home since the organization's founding in 2007. Whereas under Elaine's leadership, EveryOne home has fully embraced housing first and housing problem solving as the undergirding philosophy of EveryOne home. Whereas Elaine has secured a commitment that 20% of the Measure A1 dollars would go to those who are 20% of AMI, average median income. And that means basically that we were able to provide housing for the homelessness, those experiencing homelessness. And we actually were able to build over 1,000 units, nearly $100 million that went to this. And that's always going to be part of Elaine's legacy. And I just want to commend her for that. In addition to that, she was able to secure over 1,000 additional housing subsidies for those experiencing homelessness through the federal government. Also, she updated the plan to end homelessness in 2018 and spearheaded the case for a local revenue stream devoted to solving homelessness, Measure W, which I know you're going to talk about later. And we're really pushing hard for that. I can't be an advocate on my time with the county, but I'll just say it's a very important ballot measure. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Alameda County Board of Supervisors does hereby extend our deepest appreciation for all that Elaine DeColney has accomplished during her tenure as Executive Director for EveryOne Home, and wishes her success in all future endeavors. So congratulations, Elaine.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dave.
And I hope she has the commendation with her. I think she does, but I can't see her on my phone. So, but again, congratulations, and we really appreciate what you've done.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Dave. And again, just as a reminder, this is just a little taste of our send-off for Elaine. And I know many of you have similar sentiments to share and have worked with her for many, many years, and everyone will have a chance to speak at the end of the meeting. And now, without further ado, here is our own Jessica Shimon on racial equity.
Sorry, it looks like Jessica's on her phone. So let me find her. There she is. Okay. Did you get the?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry, that was more challenging than I thought. Okay, great. Well, I'm so excited to be here today with Darlene Flynn from the City of Oakland to talk about the Centering Racial Equity and Homeless System Design Project. Next slide, please. Next, okay. It was almost exactly a year ago that the Continuum of Care convened a broad group of stakeholders, and I mean a really wide-ranging group of people, from mayors and city council members to public housing authorities, people with current or past experiences of homelessness, philanthropic organizations, nonprofit service providers, like everybody, it felt like, civil servants from cities and county government. And together, the group resolved to complete a homeless system redesign process that would be grounded in the results of the 2018 strategic update to the EveryOne Home Plan. And that group did something that was both, it's sort of funny, it's sort of both overdue and incredibly prescient, I think. It asked that we formulate the redesign solutions through the framework of racial equity. meaning that we approach homelessness as a racial equity issue and develop solutions that respond to racial inequality as a driving force behind homelessness. It was a really powerful conversation. It was an urgent conversation, and I thought, never in a million years is HUD going to let us do this. It's not going to happen. Well, I couldn't be more proud to say that I was wrong. HUD not only encouraged us to center racial equity in homeless system design, but they provided generous support in the form of deep technical assistance from ABT associates who was flying to Alameda County on a monthly basis before the pandemic. So Darlene and I are going to walk through some of the key concepts and some of the next steps, sort of like the future orientation. But for now, I want everyone to know that the executive summary is available for you to read and download and email on the Everyone Home website, right? So everyonehome.org, you can find the executive summary there. Next slide, please. I'll pass it to Darlene.
Okay, sorry, we were having to unmute me. I muted myself because I am working from home and I have a noisy little chihuahua. But it's a pleasure for me to be here with you today, and it was an honor to be invited to participate in this process. And my task is to quickly walk you through some concepts and ideas that are part of centering racial equity in any effort. And they are certainly the assumptions and framework and principles that we applied to doing this work that resulted in the report that you all are going to be receiving. So there is a need, because of the history of race and racism in this country, to reframe our thinking and to work as hard as we possibly can to get outside of the normalized and socialized constructs that we've been provided in our typical education and socialization. So we start with a set of working assumptions that helps us get out of the box of the status quo in order to be able to imagine and research into and analyze into different outcomes that are equitable and outcomes that serve all of our residents. So I always begin my presentations by talking about these assumptions. These are the givens. These are the things that we work into as we're working through the problem. And it doesn't matter what the problem is. This framework is the same no matter where I have the opportunity to do this work. The first one is that race matters. Almost every indicator of well-being shows troubling disparities by race. And we know this is profoundly true for homelessness and those who find themselves impacted by homelessness. There are very troubling disparities in which racial groups are most impacted. Then we also assume and know that disparities are often created and maintained inadvertently, most often these days, through policies and practices that contain barriers to opportunity. In this case, we were looking for barriers to the opportunity to recover from homelessness or leave the homelessness condition. And so we began from the very beginning thinking about what are those barriers. It's possible and only possible to close equity gaps by using strategies determined through an intentional focus on race. So if we know we have racial disparities, and we know we do, we must focus on those racial disparities in order to close them. If opportunities in all key areas of well-being are equitable, then equitable results will follow. This is a simple logic statement that reminds us to connect inputs to outcomes and to recognize that the outcomes that we're getting do result from inputs that we may or may not have complete control over, but which are impacting our ability to be effective in delivering homelessness services for all. And then finally, given the right message, analysis, and tools, people will work toward racial equity. And this is my job. This is what I get to do for 40 or more hours a week for the city of Oakland, is share with people the messages and the analysis and the tools that we use to unpack the challenges of closing racial disparities in our society. So that's what I do, and that's what I'm doing here with you today, as a matter of fact. So next slide, please. So these are some of the disparities that we're challenging in doing our work around homelessness. And you can see that the groups that are most impacted by racial disparities are the first two, the ones on the left, African Americans and Native American Indians and Alaska Natives. both of these groups are overrepresented in homeless by quite a substantial amount as compared to their representation in the population. And that's how we determine a disparity. We compare the impacts of homelessness on the groups, and we also compare it to the representation in the general population. And African Americans are more than 4 times represented in homelessness as compared to their representation in the population in Alameda County. The same is true for Native American, American Indians and Alaska Natives. Other groups have different kinds of representation, and we also want to be monitoring how those outcomes are going as we move forward. But for this process, we centered the groups that are most impacted at this time. We also paid good attention to those who are for whom language is a barrier and some other issues besides race, because we know that participation in the resources of our society are impacted by numerous kinds of situations. So we got a little bit beyond just African American and Native American, but we knew that we would not be doing a complete job if we didn't figure out what was going on with these groups, which represent those who are most impacted. Next slide, please. A big part of doing racial equity work is digging beneath the surface and looking for the root causes of the outcomes that we're experiencing now. And so one of the things that we wanted to make sure we had our eye on and were well aware of was the history of systemic racism as it relates to racial residential segregation, the way that activity and redlining and lack of access to wealth building through home ownership has contributed to a lack of wealth building and persistent poverty and forward momentum in the groups that were excluded from those opportunities, which of course then results in housing insecurity when we have the kind of phenomenon that we're experiencing in the Bay Area and other parts of the West Coast, where the cost of housing is rising at just an exponential rate. So when we look at these root causes and we look at how this discrimination happened and how some people and some communities were able to build wealth, which amounts to safety net and various kinds of community strategies that can help mitigate the impacts of being evicted and priced out of your housing, certain groups of people did not have access over the last 50, 60, 70 years of building those kinds of internal or community-based safety nets. And those are the groups that you see most overrepresented in homelessness. So when you look at it this way, the outcomes that we're experiencing with regard to our Black and Indigenous residents is completely understandable through a much different lens. It's the logical outcome of what has happened. So we keep that clearly in focus when we're doing equity work. What are the root causes and the history impacting the people that are overrepresented in this context? Next slide, please. Then once we have our eye on those things and we're beginning to look at the data, we want to make sure that we have the right narrative about the data in place in order to interpret the data appropriately and to try to remove as much bias as we can from our interpretation of the data. So we have to challenge the dominant narrative, because there's a very strong narrative in the US about why certain groups of people are so far behind. And if you can just click through these, normally I get to control this, so you can just go ahead and put them all up. It'll make it easier for me to talk about them. So the dominant narrative is that when people's lives don't turn out well and they're suffering from racial disparities, that's just a function of individualism and winners and losers. And some groups are just winners and some groups are just losers. And it comes down to a matter of personal merit or deficit, good choices, good decisions, talent and ability and effort, and all of the things that go into what we conceive of in our society as merit. And then, of course, people get what they deserve. So if they're homeless, they must have done something to deserve that. And that's for them to figure out how to correct. And then finally, all of this is rationalized with highly racialized assumptions and racist ideas that come in to bolster it underneath the surface, usually not spoken out loud, but collectively held and understood in our society about certain groups of people that just are not as good as others. And that is the definition of racism, system of racial hierarchy. So we have this dominant narrative that we're immersed in and that's floating all around us, but when we do equity work, we want to challenge it. So we replace it with an equity narrative. And what we're aiming for is systems and transforming systems so that they respond to individuals in a way that changes outcomes. Whereas the dominant narrative is 100% focused on individuals and whether or not they made the right choices or pulled on their bootstraps hard enough, or made poor decisions or whatever the case might be. We want to shift and we want to look at systems because we recognize that individuals develop in the context of access to opportunity. Each and every one of us as individuals developed in the context of the amount of the opportunity that was around us while we were developing. And that merit itself is determined on a profoundly uneven playing field. We draw assumptions about people's merit based on a combination of their effort and their opportunity, and don't take into account typically that not all of us had access to the same opportunity. And then what people get is influenced by many factors that are completely outside of their control. And this includes those of us who have been very, very successful. At some portion of our success is almost always attributable to things that we actually didn't do for ourselves and couldn't have possibly controlled for. And then finally, racist ideas and discriminations present lifelong risks and challenges to the very people that we're trying to solve this problem for. So even while we're trying to understand the way that systems underserve or have disadvantaged huge portions of our population, we also are simultaneously watching them being impacted on an ongoing basis in real time, in present time, by racist ideas and discrimination in housing opportunities and access to housing in high opportunity areas, and so on and so forth. So this awareness of the difference between a dominant narrative and an equity narrative actually challenges our implicit bias. It challenges our assumptions that could be leading us astray when it comes to closing disparities and ending homelessness. I think that might be my last slide for the moment. Let's see, please. Oh, there's one more. So this idea about centering race, I think it's really important for us to understand why we approach it this way. Harry Blackmun, who was a Supreme Court justice, he's actually the Supreme Court justice who authored Roe versus Wade. Although he was a Republican appointee, he proved in his career to be one of the most progressive and justice-minded justices to serve on the Supreme Court. He said, in order to get beyond racism, one must first take race into account. There is no other way. When race is so profoundly predetermined access to opportunity and the life trajectory of our residents, we must take it into consideration if we want to get beyond it, because ignoring it does not make the impacts of race go away. So the first step is to understanding the impacts and having a plan to address them. Reaching our goal means starting in a different place and leaving no one behind. Means we have to deepen our understanding of the root causes of disparities and what must be addressed to change outcomes. We're very outcome focused. And our systems need to be retooled if we expect to get different outcomes. Of course, we won't be perfect, at least for a while. We expect to be working on this for a while because this situation has been hundreds of years in the making. But if we focus on our systems, we can get there faster by retooling them to get different outcomes. And even if we're not perfect, we'll be able to serve equity better and be much more accountable to communities that we've historically not served very well or have underserved, even in comparison to what our intentions were. And that's my last slide. Jesse, you get to come back in, talk a little more.
Fantastic. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. Right, so to better understand the impact of race in the homeless response system, we pulled together a multiracial and interdisciplinary team of people from the Department of Public Health, Alameda County, EveryOne Home, the City of Oakland, Social Services Agency, Supervisor Chan's office, and we met a lot. We met weekly for months, and really dug in, right, to do a racial equity impact analysis. That looked at we started with the quantitative data, looking at the performance, how are we doing it, taking it apart by race, seeing where there are problems. And we found racial disparities in our inflow and returns to homelessness, which is to say that Black and Indigenous people are becoming homeless and returning to homelessness at higher rates than their counterparts. And so we wanted to dig deeper into that. What's that about? So to understand the root causes of those disparities, we worked with community-based organizations. I think they're listed here on this slide, to convene some focus groups with currently and formerly homeless people to capture their stories and analyze the cross-cutting themes across their stories. next slide. So this slide gives a sense of who we talked to, and this is what we found, and I'm going to summarize really briefly, is that we found that people didn't experience their lives, not surprisingly, through the framework of structural racism. And so they talked about their experiences and their path to homelessness in terms of their personal decision-making and character, going back to that dominant narrative that Darlene brought up. But when we looked across people's stories, right, the violence of structural racism in their lives was inescapable, right? And so that was very illuminating. And we saw that structural racism impacted social and familial networks that may have otherwise prevented homelessness, and gives us some hints about what prevention efforts might look like, right? We saw that economic inequality is exacerbated by structural racism. We saw that people face huge economic barriers to obtaining and retaining housing, but they may also have low or no support service needs, right? So we had to think about how do we adjust. Maybe not another, but worth saying is that discrimination is real. Discrimination is real, and it is often the outcome of supposedly race-neutral processes, like certain requirements or rules that everyone has to meet, but still produces a racially disparate and discriminatory outcome. So we really learned a lot, and we put these, you can go to the next slide. And then we applied it, and we thought, how can we transform our system from one that is participating in structural racism, that's not really talking or thinking about it, to one that is actively trying to undo some of these things. And so our TA, we developed this model. You can read more about it in the executive summary. You can read more about all of this. But this is a very unique model, and our TA provider from APPS was really clear that she's done this kind of process in a lot of communities, and most communities' models don't look like this, right? So the equity analysis really drove the development of new models, new programs, new pathways. It's a vision for a much more equitable system that has interventions that will reduce disparities in who becomes homeless and who remains homeless, right? So really trying to address that 2-year window between when people get housing, right, and when they return to homelessness, really broadening that and creating some sustainable permanent housing opportunities for the people that we learned about. Shallow subsidies, dedicated affordable housing, and permanent supportive housing for seniors. These are all sort of new program ideas that came out of the modeling and that are specifically meant to address the barriers that we heard and saw in our data that are being confronted by Black and Indigenous people. Okay, next one. The call to action. I think it's back to Darlene.
Yeah. So I love quotes that keep me inspired, and they remind me that we have had success in advancing equity over the years of this nation. We're just not done yet. And so true peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. And I think you can fit any topic underneath this. We know that having homelessness in our streets, on our sidewalks, in our public spaces is not a signal of peace and well-being. And so if we want to get this right, we are going to have to create a different outcome that is just, that is a just outcome in context of what this country has done and what it has not yet done in order to get there. So it means it's a challenge to us. We've got to do better. We've got to change. We are in danger of getting further and further behind. We've already watched over the last 10, 15, 20 years, during the period of 10 years to end homelessness, we've watched things get worse. That means we are losing ground and we're getting further behind. And that is because we have not gotten to the root causes of homelessness, and particularly the root causes of disparities, racial disparities in homelessness. If we do it right, it will pay us back in dividends. It will actually save money over the long term, because equity is the best model. Equity is very costly to society. It's very costly to our local jurisdictions, both at the city and the county level. To maintain systems of inequity is not free. We just typically don't quantify that. So we want to reiterate here that this is a call to action. This is a sort of a moment, a moment of reflection, where we can say, look, all of this civil unrest that we are experiencing is as connected to homelessness as it is to any other form of unfair and unjust life outcomes that our society has constructed for us to contend with. This is a legacy we inherited. We didn't create it, but it's our turn. We're up to bat. This is our page of history to write on. So it is truly worthy work that we are undertaking when we center racial equity and justice.
Next
Back
slide.
to you. Yeah.
So this is the last one. So the executive summary is available on the Everyone Home website. Check it out to get more information about sort of what we did, what we learned, what the path forward is. The full report, there's an extensive 100-page full report that's being copy edited, and it's going to be available soon on the Everyone Home website. And I just, yes, this is the beginning. This is not the end. This is the beginning. And I just want to channel Susan Shelton here and say the work begins now, that this is our roadmap, and we can do this. So thank you.
Hi. So it looks like Carrie will be here soon, but to give her a little bit of time, we're just gonna move it forward with Hayward. So let me just move the screen, and if someone can unmute Jessica, and then we'll go back to Carrie. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
My name is Jessica. I work for the city of Hayward, and I'm going to be giving a brief overview on the Hayward Housing Navigation Center, and it fits in really nicely with what we just heard around centering racial equity, because I'll be talking about the demographics, both of who's being served at the Nav Center, as well as the placements into permanent housing. Next slide, please. So the Navigation Center opened just about a year ago in November of 2019. For those unfamiliar with the model, it provides shelter plus housing navigation and flexible funds to move individuals into permanent housing. The center is operated by Bay Area Community Services. At the onset, the capacity was 45 beds, and then now with the pandemic, we have downsized to 25 beds. We are currently looking at ways to actually increase the capacity by increasing the physical infrastructure on site. So in October, we increased the capacity by 8 beds through the use of RV FEMA trailers. And then we will be hoping to increase the capacity back up to the full 45 in January or February through the installation of another trailer on site. And additionally, we are currently looking to pilot a navigation center annex out of a local hotel. And so that would be kind of for folks who are more vulnerable and who cannot be living in the congregate setting at this time. Next slide, please. Here are just a few pictures. I did also look at Suzanne's slides, and she'll be showing some pics of the Fremont Navigation Center. So it's kind of a feel of what it looks like, but it's a really awesome site. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, there are some videos on the website, and I would encourage you to take a look if you just want to see what it looks like. Next slide. So to dive a little bit into what Darlene and Jesse were talking about around the disproportionality of homeless demographics versus general population demographics. This is the demographics in Hayward, and so our general population versus the 2019 point in time count. So in the blue is our general pop, and in orange is our point in time count. And so like across the county, we are also experiencing higher proportions of Black, African American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, as well as American Indian, Alaskan Native So seeing increases in those populations in our homeless population compared to our general population. Next slide. And so when we developed the Navigation Center, we really did center racial equity in the way that we prioritized who would be coming into the Navigation Center and made it explicit so that our population at the Navigation Center would mimic the population of the point in time count homeless population as opposed to the general population. And then we also really want to make sure that not only are people getting in the door, but also the people who are moving into permanent housing that matches the population of the Navigation Center as well as the point in time population. So this shows the orange is our homeless population in Hayward. The gray is the population of the Navigation Center. And then the yellow are the exits to permanent housing. And so to date, we've had, I think it's 43 exits to permanent housing, which is a 91% rate of movement to permanent housing. And I think that I loved listening to Darlene and Jesse, and I think something we'll definitely be thinking about as well is when we look at this data is, and we have a little bit more time, is returns to homelessness and breaking that down by demographics so we can make sure that we're serving our populations well. That's the end of my very brief presentation. And I believe I'm going to be turning it over to SUZANNE SHENFIL from Fremont.
SUZANNE, are you unmuted?
I'm unmuting. There I go. Hi. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Well, we're a little behind Hayward in terms of launching our Navigation Center, which launched virtually on August 29th. So we are full. We now are at capacity, which means we have, like Hayward, 25 participants who are currently housed. We're built for 45. Can you show the next slide, please? There we go. So you can see our layout and our building structure is a lot like Hayward. We're all using portable facilities, and I'm sure we also modeled a lot on the Berkeley site that was the original Navigation Center in the county. So we too are keeping demographics, and I did not include them at this point, but I will in the future, because we're also trying to look at things through a racial equity lens. I have to say, of the clients that we currently have, 21 are males and 4 are females. And in the 4 weeks that they've been in the Navigation Center, 3 have gained full employment. 1 is now receiving disability benefits. And of our population, half are employed and 96% have an income. So those are all at least initial positive indicators that makes it helpful in trying to help people find more permanent housing. Next slide. So this is part of our Navigation Center. We incorporated a lot of artwork. And the guy on the pole is Cameron Moberg, who is a quite renowned graffiti artist, actually, though he didn't do graffiti on our site. He did more nature paintings. Next one. And then this is an area also that's part of our site. So we spent a lot of time in trying to make it look calm. It is sitting basically adjacent to our city government building. And I have to say, in our first 4 weeks, we've had 0 complaints from our business community, which does sort of surround this area. And I think people would say they hardly know that the homeless are using the facility at all. And in fact, we got a very nice sizable contribution from one business owner who's exactly opposite the site, who is feeling very supportive these days. So that was all very positive, and we're looking forward to having some successful outcomes like Hayward in the near future. And I think I'm supposed to introduce somebody here. Sharon Courtney for the voter education item.
Actually, we're gonna go back to Carrie's real quick.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
so Carrie, are you able to speak? I know you're
I
here.
hope so.
Okay,
Can you hear
great.
me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great.
Right, so I'm going back to your slides right here.
Great.
Okay,
And
go ahead.
I'm told I'll be very quick. We can go ahead and move to the next one. I'm Carrie Abbott, Director of the Office of Homeless Care and Coordination, and I within Healthcare Services Agency. And I wanted to just update on our homelessness COVID response, our room key hotels, and our home key applications. Next one. This is our current room key occupancy. I'm sorry if anyone else is on their phone like I am at the moment. I cannot read the numbers at all, but I know that we have over 1,200 people currently in non-congregate shelter, and that we have over 1,000 people in the Safer Ground portfolio in 9 leased sites. Next one. In exit planning, as you know, the CARES funding expires at the end of this year. And so we're currently working on where we should move everyone into housing. Our goal is to make sure that no one needs to exit to the street, that we make an offer of housing for everyone who is in the Safer Ground sites. Those are the sites for people who are homeless and high risk. So the destinations that we're looking at, we are, we start with a room key occupancy of between 800 and 900 households. And then we look for home key exits. We'll have a minimum of 175 within the community available at the end of the year, and up to 400. And this is just within the first 30 to 60 days from now. We expect that we may have even more than that over time. The county and the city of Oakland have been working hard to bring those units across the finish line. We're also working on bridge housing exits, something that the COC committee approved a couple of months ago, and in partnership with the Community Development Agency and the city of Oakland and the city of Berkeley, we're pooling ESG COVID resources to offer people a 12-month subsidy, 12 months because that is the outside limit that the federal government will currently allow. And we believe that we can house 300 or more people using that subsidy. We also are exiting people to supportive housing directly from the Project Room Key sites. And we are identifying HUD vouchers with all of the housing authorities. We're working with Livermore, Alameda, the Housing Authority of the County of Alameda, and Berkeley and Oakland Housing Authority to see which of their vouchers we can make available to people experiencing homelessness and exiting the room key sites, or as stabilization subsidies if people are in bridge housing and need an ongoing financial support. We're also adding back in over sometime in the month of December as we ramp down the hotel in Newark. We'll be working with City of Fremont and Abode Services to open up again the Sunrise Village shelter, and working also with the City of Oakland and other shelter providers on transitional housing options for people who may not be in a position where they want to contribute income toward rent, or for whom we have a really difficult time finding another slot. Again, we think that we'll have enough housing opportunities for the people, for the number of households in the sites, but we also want to make sure that we're prioritizing some of the other available resources for people leaving the hotels. And of course, we want to launch our diversion and problem solving. Some of our providers are already doing this. We want to make sure that the county and COC are getting those resources rolling to also assist people in the hotels who may not need an ongoing subsidy. Next slide. Some of the ramp down considerations that we've been looking at with Project Roomkey, as we need to not continue to lease extremely expensive hotels, that COVID-19 continues to be a safety threat. Shelter capacity is still reduced. Most of the congregate shelters have much lower bed capacity than in a normal operating year. We'd like to maintain isolation and quarantine sites for people who are COVID positive or presumptive. And then of course, we're acquiring the Comfort Inn. We're looking at acquiring the Days Hotel. That's looking very likely. And both will be converted to permanent housing within 36 months. And we're looking to find alternative locations for the guests, but that takes time. We're working with our partner providers, of course, in identifying units, but it's a lot of units to identify. Next slide. Some of the recommendations that we recently made to our board is that we would end the COVID positive referrals into the Comfort Inn as of this weekend. We would convert Comfort Inn to a safer ground site opening in mid-December. We'll continue the Days Hotel as a safer ground site, potentially assuming ownership on December 2nd. And then we would be ending new safer ground referrals also around this weekend, mostly because the hotels are at capacity. Next slide. We're also recommending extending the Quality Inn in Oakland lease through June 30th. That allows us to continue to have an isolation and quarantine site for people who are COVID positive and homeless. We are looking to extend some limited safer ground leases through January, but closing the majority by the end of the year. And then we're working with the cities who have safer ground sites in their communities to see if they are interested in an option for additional extensions. Next slide. This is, we can skip over this one. This is the staffing for the Quality Inn for Comfort. And these are the safer ground uses and staffing that we would continue. Next slide. There we go. We also have submitted 5 grant applications for the state home key application. The Comfort Inn I described, the Days Hotel. There are 2 other county projects that would provide up to 300 additional rooms. Those have tentative reservations with the state. And of course, there are 4 Oakland projects with over 230 rooms that also have awards or tentative awards. Next slide, that's it. I think now we get to go to the Measure W voter education.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you very much for the excitement of that presentation and the scope and capacity. Let me just start by asking, quick show of hands, you can do it the old-fashioned way or with your responses. Who's been involved in Measure W? Who's been involved in Measure W? Truthfully, if you're on this call, I think we should stipulate that you've been involved in Measure W. And let's go to the next slide. Because Measure W comes out of work that everyone on this call has been doing. It comes out of the EveryOne home planning process, the focus groups with folks with lived experience and providers, comes through the policy committee, through the Office of Homeless Care and Coordination, incorporates the system modeling and the racial equity analysis. And then a number of us got together in, I think it was March 4th, is that correct? And had a wonderful breakfast together. And then our community engagement kind of got shut down with the shelter in place orders the following week. But I want to thank EveryOne Home for its leadership in helping to pull together Speakers Bureau trainings and some ongoing leadership development around Measure W. I think everyone here knows that Measure W appears on the Alameda County ballot next Tuesday. Some of you have probably already voted. And it will be about $150 million a year in new resources. And let's go to the next slide. And if we work together with all of our planning agencies to implement it right, we will have a variety of services There is a readable version. This text is too small for me to see, but there's a bit.ly link that someone could put in the chat. Maybe Dorcas would help. That if we implement Measure W right, we can provide these services, we can incorporate the racial equity lens, and we can create a system that addresses the incredible increases that we have seen in our unhoused neighbors. These are exciting prevention services, shelter, transitional housing, shallow subsidies, permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, the kinds of services that people on this call are involved in every day. Let's go to the next slide. And I am trying to win the speed contest. I really want to talk to you about two critical issues. We have a few days left. About half of Alameda County voters may have already returned their ballots. And that's good news because that means half can still hear from us. There's an email there where you can reach out to Kira O'Doherty, been an awesome organizer on the Measure W campaign. We've had Speaker Bureau heroes who've gone out and done presentations on Zoom like this. I want to thank Jesse and Courtney for helping to facilitate that process. Everyone at EveryOne Home for moving those ahead. Many of you are organizational leaders. Your organization can send a message, as I see Liz Varela, Building Futures, did a beautiful email to its supporters and its communities about Measure W. You can share Measure W content on your own social media. It's not too late to make a difference. It's not too late at all. This is a critically important time. And we'll know what we know Tuesday night. And then later on, once the election is certified, if we pass it, we need to make sure that we move to implement to ensure that funds are directed to the kinds of services that are critically important and also headed in the strategic direction that's been outlined around looking at equitable outcomes and a system that works. The generous funding that has from the San Francisco Foundation that has supported us in creating the Speakers Bureau will also help us run a leadership academy in the spring to be able to prepare community leaders to serve, to make recommendations, to help direct the funds in an equitable and effective fashion. And so I encourage you to visit. The link looks like it is there in the chat. I'm adding another one. Please sign up so we can stay in touch with you. You'll be receiving emails from EveryOne Home and from the Home Together 2020 campaign as we move ahead. Thank you for everything you've done to get us to this point. I really hope we're coming across the finish line strong and are prepared because the work really starts once it passes. And with that, I want to turn it over to someone who knows a thing or two about implementation and campaigns. Thank you, Gloria Bruce from EBHO.
Thank you, Sharon. That was a great rundown of Measure W, and I was just there in the background to be Sharon's hype woman in the chat. As Elaine's been everybody's hype woman today in the chat. I love it. Like going out strong, Elaine, boosting everybody. So my job is to talk to you at lightning speed about just two other propositions that EveryOne Home has endorsed and supported. And I'm sure a lot of us have already voted. Raise your hand if you've already voted. And hopefully it was yes on both of these, and of course on Measure W. So all I have to say is, of course, we have Prop 15, Schools and Communities First, probably the biggest statewide measure this year, absolutely critical. And that's the one that will, thanks Elaine, that's the one that will redistribute, make sure that large corporations start paying their fair share back into our communities. It exempts small business. It exempts residences, it exempts agricultural land. It's really about reforming outdated tax structures to make sure our big corporations are paying more of what we need for infrastructure, for city services, for schools, so much more. There's an estimate that it will bring $12 billion a year back into California communities. And for Alameda County, it's estimated to bring about $618 million a year back just into this county if it passes. So we're looking at Measure W, so important. That's about $150 million a year, right? So let's pass Measure W, but then let's like redo how we're thinking about taxes and who's paying their fair share so we don't have to keep doing that, right? So yes on 15. I will leave it there. Don't believe the no ads. Don't believe certain organizations that unfortunately have been brought over to the dark side. Believe us and vote yes on 15. And then the other one that I'm speaking about is yes on Prop 21. This is very similar to one that EveryOne Home endorsed a few years back, Prop 10, and it basically is a statewide proposition that would broaden what local cities and jurisdictions are allowed to do in terms of stabilizing rent for their tenants, and allow them to create the locally appropriate rent control restrictions that they need. It would open up a few more types of homes to rent control. It would still, exempt certain mom and pop owners. It's a slightly narrower version of the wholesale reform that was Prop 10 a few years ago. And even though we've seen some great things in the past couple of years with strong tenant protections, stronger tenant protections passed through Bill 1482 last year, which established statewide just cause, which is wonderful, but it still doesn't protect everybody from everyday kind of rent increases that drive a lot of people out. And while I think now everyone's like, oh, rents are going down. Well, sure, some rents in top end buildings are going down some places, but the types of rents that are softening right now are really ones that were completely out of reach for our kinds of folks in the first place. And of course, with people losing their jobs, having to stay in because of COVID, eviction is a huge threat. And we just need cities to be able to put in the rent stabilization policies that they and their tenants need. So we are urging a yes vote on Prop 21, very much in line with EveryOne Home's homelessness prevention strategies. So I think that's all I have, just pitching on those two, and I will leave it there. And who am I handing it over to? I'm handing it over to Janae. All right.
Yes. Thank you so much, Gloria, for bringing all your energy and helping folks get fired up about voting, because later on I will be asking all of you as the COC membership to vote on an important decision regarding our annual amendments to the governance charter and to the membership elections. But first, I'm going to give a few updates about our committees. So next slide, please. So hopefully, Simone, you're still on. I know she had another meeting, but I'm really, really excited to introduce Simone as the new HUD COC chair. She's been a really active member on HUD COC, really important in kind of developing the youth advisory board and making sure that our transitional age youth that are experiencing homelessness or recently experienced homelessness actually have a say in the solutions and in the resources and services that we provide to take in our system. So Simone, if you're on, let me check. I'd love to invite you to say something.
Hi, yes.
Great.
Can you all hear me? Okay, great. I didn't prepare anything to say because I am supposed to be on a meeting right now. So I just wanted to say hi to everyone and thank you for allowing me to be in this position to head COC. And I look forward to getting to know people I don't know yet and to just, developing relationships and doing good work together. So, all right, I'm out.
Thank you so much, Simone. Take care.
On to another call. Thank you all.
Looking forward to working with Simone. Next slide. So I wanted to give a big shout out and a thank you to Doug, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us today, but he's the outgoing HUD COC chair and he's done an amazing job of keeping us running, really efficient at facilitating our meetings and making sure that our committee members have the information they needed in the context they needed to make informed decisions. Doug is amazing. He will be missed. And I'm sure he'll be there to support Simone as she takes on this new leadership role. Next slide, please. So now I have the pleasure of introducing one of our new System Coordination Committee co-chairs, Fina Perez. She's from the Alameda County Probation Office. She's also a really engaged and exciting new member of System Coordination Committee. She has some amazing ideas, so I'm really excited to work with her. Fina, I'm going to ask you to unmute and ask you to share a little bit more.
Yes, hello everyone, and I'm really excited to be on this call right now, and looks like we have 78 participants, so very excited about that. And also excited about being the co-chair of the System Coordination Committee. It's a great group, and I want to contribute as much as I can. I have a passion for helping our community, and so I'm excited for this next chapter.
Thank you, Fina. Looking forward to working with you more. So now, I also have the pleasure of introducing Kate Hart from SAVE, the organization in Fremont, as the co-chair of the System Coordination Committee. I had the pleasure of working with her before as a staff attorney at Family Violence Law Center. Really looking forward to working with you, Kate. I don't know if you want to share a few words.
Just quickly, I've been on the committee for a while and I'm excited to step into the co-chair position. And I'm happy to be working with Fina because we know each other from way back. And I'm just glad to be hopefully bringing, more DV, domestic violence perspective to the work that's happening in the system. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Kate. Looking forward to working with you. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give really deep and heartfelt thank yous for Lara Tannenbaum and Suzanne Warner, our outgoing SCC co-chairs. They've been amazing, super supportive as I've been learning this new role, facilitating SCC. So thank you so much, Lara and Suzanne. You've been super helpful, and we will probably continue to reach out to you for help because you two are amazing. So thank you. Next slide. Okay, so really quickly, I wanted to give an update on the strategic planning process. So as most of you know, the leadership board has been planning a retreat, a strategic planning retreat for a while. So originally they were planning to host a set of 3 workshops or workshop retreats this month, but that did not happen. COVID has caused a lot of delays. So we've been struggling to actually find some facilitators, but it sounds like we are close to doing it. So we're hoping that the strategic planning retreats will happen in November or December. And just to give a quick recap for folks that weren't aware of this process, is that the point of this process is to actually amend our governance charter, to amend the structure of our governance to ensure and to center racial equity, to clarify each committee's roles and responsibilities, to increase accountability, transparency, all the things that we need to have an effective and efficient system. So we're really looking forward to these retreats, and we will keep you posted. Thank you. So with that being said, we'll be asking you shortly to vote on a recommendation that has been approved by the leadership board and the HUD COC committee regarding the annual election and the annual amendments to the governance charter. So again, just as context, the strategic planning process may involve major changes to the governance charter, major changes to the size and the composition of our committees, including the HUD COC and the leadership board. So next slide. So given that, we thought it would be best to delay the annual amendments to the governance charter until after the strategic planning retreats, but with 2 exceptions. So the HUD COC already approved 2 interim changes to the governance charter earlier this year. So the first one is for electronic signatures for releases of information during the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously to reduce the spread, the risk of the spread of COVID-19. And then 2, to designate a youth advisory board seat on our HUD COC board. The youth advisory board will be really important partners when it comes to applying for future funding for youth specifically, and for the upcoming point in time count, specifically the youth count. So we thought it was really important to make sure that there was a youth at the table. So that'll be a part of the vote. And then the second piece, yeah, thank you, next slide, will be to delay the annual membership elections given the potential changes to the committees and the composition of the committees. So delaying that annual membership election until June 30th of next year or after the strategic planning, whichever comes first. And then to extend committee seat terms ending in December of this year or January of next year until the same date, June 30th or after strategic planning. And then in the interim, allowing committees to fill vacancies via the recommendation of that committee chair or co-chairs and the vote of the full committee. So next slide. So just a quick recap of what we're asking you as a membership to approve. It's already been approved by HUD COC and leadership board. So we will be having a vote via a poll. You'll have about 1 minute to respond to that poll. And if the majority of participants vote yes, then that motion will pass. So hopefully you're still fired up about voting. And I'll ask Dorcas right now if you could start the vote.
The poll is launched.
Thank you.
So 30 more seconds, and I see that we have half the people here voted or already voted. Okay, I'm gonna stop the poll in 5 seconds.
So please vote if you can.
Okay, I'm closing the poll now.
Thank you, Dorcas.
So I'll share the results. And it passes.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you so much. So now I'll pass it off to Liz Varela, Elaine's recognition.
All right. So, Elaine. So we're saying goodbye to Elaine. She's leaving her position as the executive director of Everyone Home. And as she said, she's not leaving Alameda County, and she's not leaving ending homelessness. So that's good. This is not a big goodbye. This is just a goodbye from Everyone Home and an appreciation of the work that she's done in the last 13 years as the founding executive director of Everyone Home. And there has been so much accomplished by Everyone Home over the last 13 years as because of Elaine as a leader and because of Everyone Home's start as an agency. I mean, if you think about, those of you who have been doing this as long as I have, if you think about where we were as a county before 2007, so much has happened since then. I'm sure the folks that are speaking after me will talk about it. And I do want to say I've worked with Elaine for the last 27 years. She is the reason why I do this work. She is the reason why I'm executive director today of Building Futures. And I just want to thank her for that. And I'm sure we'll work together again as she moves forward as a consultant. And so I will end, and if folks have not mentioned other things that Elaine has done as a leader in Everyone Home, I'll pick that up at the end. But our next person to say goodbye and recognize her contributions first is Mo Wright.
Hi, thank you, Liz. I guess this is one of the many goodbyes. So I'm Mo Wright. I'm the chair of the leadership board, and I've been honored to work with Elaine since 2013. She's taught me a lot about the systematic solutions to end homelessness. I have come to admire her strong intellect and deep understanding of the many issues involved in this movement. My commitment to this work is partially stems from my ties with religious communities. And I'm grateful that Elaine shares that background with me, as she is a graduate of Pacific School of Religion. She brings a real passion for social justice to her work, and I know that she will continue on in the movement to end homelessness in her new career. Thank you, Elaine, for your many years of important work. And we'll miss you here, but we'll certainly see you in other places. Thanks. And I think Laura Tannenbaum is next.
Yes, hi. This is Lara from City of Oakland. And I was thinking about this last night and what I wanted to say to you, Elaine, and what I wanted to say about you. And I realized there are many things that I admire about you, but the one that I really wanted to highlight that's kind of overarching over everything else is your unwavering belief that we can end homelessness in Alameda County. And that is really front and center in everything that you do. And I think for those of us that are doing this work day in and day out, it's so helpful when we talk with you, because it, for at least I'll speak for me personally, it puts me back in that place and it grounds me of like, this is the purpose and this is what we're doing and this is what we're working towards. It's easy to lose sight of that goal. But as you all know, if you talk with Elaine, she absolutely carries that message in everything that she does. And to that end, she is a tireless advocate, she is a strong public speaker, and she is a real strategic thinker about how to move us forward towards that goal. And so, Elaine, I would say that I would miss that, except that we won't miss that. And I think that that is undoubtedly the part of you that you will carry forward into your new role. And so really looking forward to seeing how you step into that new role and to working with you in that new role. And thank you for everything that you've done in your Everyone Home role. And I believe I am introducing Jacqueline McCormick from the City of Berkeley.
Hi, everyone. Am I on? Okay, good. First of all, I want to say how honored I am to have been asked to say something about Elaine. And I have known Elaine not for probably as long as many of you. I came into this role as Mayor Aragine's contact person for homelessness back after he was elected in 2016. So it was really the beginning of 2017. And I remember, I don't know, Elaine, if you remember this, but I remember our first interaction. I'm not one of those of you who know me who holds your tongue. And Elaine was in a car, I know, we were talking, she called me from a car she was in on her way to HUD, I think, in DC. And it had something, I don't even remember the context, but it had something to do about Measure A. And I think it's when we were discussing the percentage of really extremely low income units that would be incorporated into that project. And let's just say we didn't get off to a really good start, but it was quickly turned around because just a couple additional meetings, I really understood where she was coming from. She understood where I was coming from. She actually instilled in me the passion for this work. And, you know, I am one of the biggest cheerleaders you could have in working on homeless issues, not just in our community, but nationally. And Elaine and I have had several conversations about just the fact that what we have is not a homeless problem. What we have is a poverty problem. And her leadership and her vision in moving forward this equity work, while at the same time being reflective about what got us here in the first place and the work that we need to do as a nation and as a society to repair the injustice that we have shoveled onto our Black and brown communities, is an inspiration to us all. And I know while we're saying goodbye for her leading Everyone Home, I know she's not going away, and I am really looking forward to conspiring with her on some things we can do in the future. So Elaine, thank you for accepting being my friend on Facebook, because that way I know I'll stay in touch with you one way or another. And I'm going to introduce my friend Michelle Starrett.
Thank you, Jack. Good to see you. Elaine, I am so pleased to be able to tell you how appreciative we are here at Alameda County's Housing and Community Development Department to have worked with you all these years. And I'm just going to share that the very first time I met you was back in 1998 when we were working on Bessie Coleman Court. And what a struggle that was to do all of the negotiations with the federal government to get that allocation of homeless housing. And the Bessie Coleman Court project, along with all of the other projects, were just so important. And you were the best advocate because you really pushed everybody to ensure that there was funding for all of those projects. So I just want to really say thank you for all of your hard work, because, you know, as other folks have also said, you've been incredibly dedicated and steadfast in your belief that this is really important work. And we all agree with you. That's why we're doing this work also. But your consistency and tenacity, let's use the word tenacity, has been really impressive. And so thank you for everything that you've done for everybody here in Alameda County, and best of luck in your next adventure.
Carrie will go next. Carrie, are you unmuted?
Yes.
Great.
I think so. I actually made it back from the county building to my office, listening to all of those remarks. So I first met Elaine at 13 or 14 years ago when I had just launched a consulting practice, and I was working with HCD on the COC NOFA of all things. I also remember when they were ramping up Everyone Home and selected Elaine, and that Elaine was really chosen for this role because of how much her passion for the work really shone through. And I think that the people who made that choice and recognized that passion were absolutely correct. That absolutely played out. And I think we've been able to see it in every day that Elaine has served in this job. There are a few of us who've been working on ending homelessness for a couple of decades. I can attest that Elaine is one of those, and you can really see what keeps people who can do this for 2 decades or longer, what keeps you going is your passion in the work. In the last year, I've so appreciated the welcome back to the county that Elaine and Everyone Home provided, and the ability to brainstorm and to reflect, and then to try to really just jointly move forward with our unhoused neighbors at the center of anything that we do. I also have appreciated Elaine's personal and professional contributions, and of course, most of all, her dedication to this work. Colleen Chavla, the Director of Healthcare Services Agency, asked me to also send her gratitude for the commitment. And of course, we both wish you well in your next steps. Thank you so much, Elaine. I think I'm handing it back to Liz.
Yes. So I met Elaine in 1993 as a volunteer. And so we have had our whole careers together. But I just want to say, as a provider working with Everyone Home, one of the big things, the big shifts that happened in 2007 moving forward was really orienting all of us, both in government and nonprofits, to focus in the same way, move in the same direction, ending homelessness, housing ends homelessness. And we got through the 2009. We created CES, shelter standards, and now COVID. And I think from Elaine's leadership in Everyone Home, it really is Alameda County orienting ourselves with each other to move forward to end homelessness. And what we have to look forward to in addressing racial inequity in homelessness and housing, and dealing with the end of COVID is a large part due to Elaine bringing us together and having us and moving in one direction. So now we're going to move. So thank you. And now we're going to move forward. And if anyone else in this meeting would like to say something, you can raise your hand and Dorcas will unmute you. And if you are joining by phone, you can do *9. You also feel free to put something in chat, and Elaine, you can also send Elaine an email if you'd like to say something more personal. Sharon Hockenleiden would like to say something. Is she unmuted?
I just unmuted her. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Hi, Elaine. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say first impression of Elaine was that she walked into a City of Berkeley collaborative meeting back in 2007, I think, and said these words: "You're either on the train or you're not on the train, because the train is leaving the station and we are doing housing first." And I think we all sort of thought, who is this person telling us what we're going to do? And it turned out that we all got on the train left the station. And for that, I feel eternally grateful to you. I think that the work you've done, Elaine, has been outstanding. You've been controversial for good reason. You've been unwavering in your passion and this idea we could end homelessness when most of us, I'll speak for myself, struggle with that idea. And I've learned so much, and I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done and for just the longevity of the train ride before I knew you and since, and for what you're going to continue to stay on that train. So I'm just really, really honored to know you and to have worked with you, and hope to continue to keep doing that. So thank you, thank you.
All right. Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
I saw Laura Escobar raise her hand.
And Sandy Schneider too.
Okay.
Go ahead, Laura.
Well, I know this isn't, I know we'll stay in touch, Elaine, but I just wanted to publicly thank you for all of the support to me personally. I think I met you, you were on, when I started in the job I have as emergency food and shelter, you were on the local board helping to make decisions. And I've just always see you as a mentor. I quote you and many of your wise things when I'm trying to explain to people at United Way the world of what all this work is. And so I often use a lot of your quotes and the way you explain things when I'm talking to folks. So I want to be you when I grow up. And thank you for all of your support to me and belief in me over the years. So we'll be in touch. So there are lunch dates in our future. Maybe not for another year, but in our future. So thank you.
Sandy?
And I think it's my turn. I don't know many of you, but I do know Elaine from way back. It's been over 20 years. I was a volunteer at Building Futures when Elaine was there as the executive director. And she hooked me. I'm still involved. Early on, my background is in finance, and that is kind of an odd thing for most people, board members in this field. But she hooked me in. I started tutoring her in finance, and became very interested in the whole field. I was there for her transition when she left Building Futures, and when Liz Varela, I was on the board when we appointed Liz Varela. So we did, I think, some good work on both parts. And it's really a pleasure to be able to be part of your second transition or third transition, or however many it's been now for you. But good luck to you. Best wishes. And just had to say hi and congratulations.
All right, I think that's it. And now we can.
We have one more person.
Okay.
Peter, I think he's unmuted now. And I think he's the last one. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, very last. No pressure. Hi, Elaine. I have really enjoyed working with you and getting to know you over the past few years. And one thing I would say is that we all know that homelessness in this state, in this county, in this region is such a political and messy and contentious issue. And one thing that I persistently admire about you is your insistence that we stay above that fray and that we put the work of serving our clients first and put the work of ending this moral outrage first. And so thank you for that. Thank you for your leadership. When this pandemic is over at some point, hopefully soon, I look forward to staying up past our bedtimes and getting a beer in July in Washington, D.C. once again, where I'm sure our paths will continue to cross. Best of luck to you moving forward, and we will certainly not be strangers.
All right, now we get to unmute Elaine so she can talk.
Okay. Wow, I'm so overwhelmed, and thank you all. They're beautiful messages in the chat and for everybody's words. And you know, honestly, I can't think of a better person to have introduced this session than my dear friend Liz Varela. We were babies when we started this work, And now we're just young, hot things ready to take on the world 30 years later. But we've worked together for such a long time. And so many of you that I've known more recently and known for so long. Sandy, oh, I'm so moved that you joined this meeting. But what I think I'm reminded of in these remarks, and I'm so glad that Sharon and Jack came on and talked about the first time I ever talked to them, they were mad at me because it is about the work. The people on the streets are desperate. And so we have to be willing to say hard things to get to the point where we do good work together. And Jack and I have done good work. And Peter was part of that good work in the city of Berkeley. And Sharon has done good housing first work all over this county and is now at St. Mary's. So when we push ourselves beyond our comfort zone and think of people who are living in the most uncomfortable circumstances imaginable and unconscionable in this society, we can do the hard work of saying what needs to be said, of all getting over ourselves and getting this important job done. And we together have done so many things. I was moved. I know Dave Brown's not on the call anymore, but Dave talked about the 20 for 20 in Measure A1 to make sure we built homes for people at the lowest income, for the work on Measure W. And I appreciate the commendations, but every time he said Elaine, my mind said we. Everything that has happened in this county is a we. We did it together. We did that system modeling and racial equity report. It is going to change the conversation across the nation about how homelessness gets addressed. And we did that here in Alameda County, led by Darlene and Jesse and Alexis and Susan Shelton and the Public Health Department and Carrie and Suzanne. I mean, the list goes on. The we is big. Let's keep making that we bigger. I'm so excited by our new chairs of our committees because it says that this work can grow, this team can strengthen. And I am changing my job, but as I guess maybe is obvious, I'm not changing how committed I am to making sure that everyone in our community has a safe, affordable place to call home. So I'll work with you differently. I'll still be here, but it has been my honor to have this community and this endeavor my life's work. So thank you all. I'll see you on the flippy side.
I think that ends the meeting. Dorcas, does that end the meeting?
Yes, that the meeting has finished. Thank you, Elaine.
Dorcas, can you save the chat? I couldn't keep up with everything, and I would love to read it. People put some sweet
Yeah, it'll be safe. Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.